Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas on France 24. Here's a look at what's coming up in today's show. The maker of painkiller, OxyContin, pays a $270 million settlement to the state of Oklahoma, the first in a wave of lawsuits accusing Purdue Pharma of fueling the deadly opioid crisis sweeping the U.S. Then people in Parkland, Florida, still coping with fallout from last year's school shooting, are now facing a new set of questions after two students from the same school commit suicide. And from its heyday with thousands of movie rental stores around the world, Blockbuster is down now to just one. A visit to what's become a tourist attraction in Oregon coming up. I'm Jeannie Godula. Donald Trump declared victory this week after the hotly anticipated Mueller report said there was no collusion between the president's 2016 campaign and Moscow. But Democrats are showing no sign of backing down from the many legal questions still surrounding the president and his associates. According to a summary of the findings sent to Congress by Attorney General William Barr, the report, 2 years in the making, stopped short of clearing the president of obstruction of justice charges. But Donald Trump still seized the moment to claim victory.
It was just announced there was no collusion with Russia, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction, and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration.
Next, $270 million. That's what Purdue Pharma, the maker of powerful painkiller OxyContin, is paying the state of Oklahoma in a settlement. It's the end of the road for the lawsuit accusing the drug maker of aggressively marketing the painkiller and helping fuel the opioid epidemic that's claimed close to 200,000 American lives. Catherine Clifford reports.
A groundbreaking settlement in the deadly opioid crisis plaguing the U.S. as major seller Purdue Pharma agrees to hand $270 million to the state of Oklahoma. It comes just 2 months before the lawsuit was due to become the first of a recent wave of similar cases to go to trial.
Today's agreement is only the first step. This team and I will continue preparing for trial, where we intend to hold the other defendants, in this case, accountable for their role in creating the worst public health crisis our state and nation has ever seen.
U.S. President Donald Trump has called the crisis a public health emergency.
It is time to liberate our communities from this scourge of drug addiction. Never been this way.
Opioids, including both heroin and prescription drugs, were a factor in a record 48,000 deaths across the U.S. in 2017, with many patients becoming addicted to the painkiller OxyContin following accidents. Purdue Pharma is accused of helping to create the crisis through its marketing of this painkiller to doctors, making tens of billions of dollars from the drug.
For over 100 years, the medical community in the United States, and indeed throughout the world, was well aware that opioids like oxycodone and hydrocodone are highly addictive. Purdue changed that perception through a devious but very effective marketing campaign.
Lawyers for plaintiffs pursuing similar cases on a national level welcomed the statement and now hope it can lead the way in forcing other pharmaceutical companies to pay back to the community. Nearly $200 million will go towards establishing a National Center for Addiction Studies and Treatment at Oklahoma State University, while local governments will get $12.5 million. The company's controlling family, the Sacklers, are responsible for $75 million of the settlement. The family are major cultural donors. In the past few weeks, as the accusations have mounted, the Tate in London and the Guggenheim in New York have cut ties with the family, while other museums have come under pressure to follow suit. However, not everyone sees the settlement as a victory. Some victims and activists say they were denied the chance to hold the company fully accountable in court.
Now, also in the U.S. this week, 3 suicides devastated communities already linked by tragic school shootings. 2 were young survivors of last year's massacre at a high school in Parkland, Florida. The third was a father of a child killed in the 2012 attack on Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. The deaths have shown a spotlight on the lingering trauma left by gun violence, as Emerald Maxwell reports.
A ribbon for each of the victims killed by gun violence since Sandy Hook. Over the past week, tragedy struck again for survivors, with 3 people taking their own lives. 2 of them had been students at Stoneman Douglas, a Florida school attacked on Valentine's Day last year. The third, the father of a child killed at Sandy Hook Elementary 6 years ago. Jeremy Richmond had set up a non-profit to support neuroscience research into what leads someone to cause harm. The AVL Foundation said his death tragically spoke to how insidious a challenge brain health can be. Calls are growing for more support for those who survive mass shootings, suffering from conditions like post-traumatic stress and survivor's guilt. Former Stoneman Douglas student David Hogg asked how many more kids had to be taken for the government to do anything, adding 2 to the death toll from the 2018 shooting.
Still going on, we're still feeling the after effects of this tragedy that could have been avoided. And these kids, they shouldn't have guilt about it. It's not them that should have the guilt. It's the leaders of Broward County that should have the guilt that allowed this to happen.
In the 20 years since Columbine, more than 223,000 American students have been exposed to gun violence. On top of the trauma and grief resulting from these incidents, survivors sometimes have to deal with political scrutiny. In the aftermath of the Stoneman Douglas attack, students who lobbied for tougher gun control found themselves under attack from right-wing commentators. And Jeremy Richmond was among the families of Sandy Hook victims who filed a defamation lawsuit last year against conspiracy theorist Alex Jones for claiming that the shooting was a hoax.
Venezuela decreed a 24-hour holiday Tuesday to cope with a new near-nationwide blackout. The government, in the midst of a major opposition led by self-proclaimed interim President Juan Guaido, said the power outages were caused by an attack targeting its main hydroelectric plant. That came after a week-long power outage earlier this month, with many Venezuelans now wondering if this will be the new normal. Also this week, the Mexican president demanded an apology for what he called the abuses of centuries of colonialism. Andrés Manuel López Obrador tore open a 500-year-old wound when he sent letters to the King of Spain and the Pope. The Spanish government responded with a blunt no, saying it firmly rejects the idea. The Vatican, for its part, reminded Mexico a series of popes had already apologized for the abuses committed in the name of evangelizing the indigenous peoples of the New World. Now, Apple rolled out its plans this week to finally jump into the streaming business first pioneered by Netflix. Oprah Winfrey, Steven Spielberg, and Jennifer Aniston were part of a parade of A-listers who took to the stage at Apple's California headquarters. Apple CEO Tim Cook also introduced the Apple credit card with both a physical and digital version that gives you up to 3% cash back. But Apple's stock closed down 1% after the announcement. Vague details about the credit card's interest rate and the price of the new streaming service left investors unconvinced that they could make up for slowing iPhone sales. And as Apple was announcing its streaming future, one former video giant is now down to its very last store, a victim of the changing ways we watch movies and TV. There were once thousands of Blockbuster rental stores around the world. Selena Sykes has more now on the last one in Oregon.
Wandering through the aisles, browsing the shelves, and experiencing the thrill of snagging that last copy. From its membership cards to those dreaded late fees, going to a Blockbuster store was once a cherished ritual for all film lovers. Fast forward to 2019, just one is still in business.
We still have popcorn ceilings, we have yellow and blue everywhere, we still have the same movies everywhere. It just feels like you're stepping back in time.
The town of Bend in Oregon is home to the world's last Blockbuster store. Staying afloat in the age of tech is not easy. Its computers are rebooted by floppy disks and membership cards are written by hand.
We didn't want to give in. We did everything we possibly could to cut costs and to keep ourselves relevant. If you'd have told me 15 years ago that I would be here still running the last one, I would have said no way.
In its heyday in the early 2000s, Blockbuster had 9,000 outlets. But what was once the world's largest video renting chain struggled to keep up with the rise of on-demand streaming. Selling souvenirs, much of the store's business now comes from nostalgia-seeking tourists.
I think I miss quite a bit being able to walk into a Blockbuster or a CD store and have that social experience and see people looking at stuff and talking to people that understand, what's out there and available in the market. Right.
But the last Blockbuster also has regular local customers who enjoy the novelty of renting films.
Today we were looking for Riding in Cars with Boys, which is a weird older movie, but we can't find it anywhere. And then also it's the only place that still rents games.
The last Blockbuster store has even inspired a documentary. With new sign-ups every day, it's confident it won't be hitting the rewind button anytime soon.
We'll leave you now in Mexico, where a volcanic explosion lit up the sky this week. The El Popo volcano unleashed a powerful explosion, spewing out lava, incandescent rock, and ash. Mexico City residents were shaken by the tremors following the violent eruption just 40 miles away. El Popo is the country's most active volcano. That wraps it up for this edition of Inside the Americas. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, if you want to get the very latest on the region, you can always check out our website, France24.com. In the meantime, I'll see you next time for all the news from north to south.